YouTube channel. I'm gonna do a little review of my Surly Lowside, basically just going over the bike and what I've done to it so far, because I can't really ride it yet. Why? Because this is what it looks like outside. So behind me is my Surly Lowside. I did a review on this bike on my site already, but it was in the basement, kind of crappy video, and I was all like still recovering from my knee surgery, which I still am, but I'm in much better mood now. So I feel like I was kind of melodramatic or pretty boring in that video. So I'm gonna just go over this bike again. I do have the dropper post on there. I have another kind of crappy, not well done video of me installing that thing. My goal is to improve my YouTube videos. This one probably won't be perfect or great, but the more I do this, the better I get at it. So let's flip this around. So here it is, the Surly Lowside, just when you thought Singlespeeding was dead. Chromoly frame, that's a Surly thing. They've always been doing chromoly frames. They got this cool little like flaming barrel on the down tube. I don't know what that's all about, but you get the typical Surly natch. I used to know what that meant, but no, I don't remember. Pretty sweet ride. I love this bike. So we'll talk a little bit about this bike. Plenty long top tube. I want to say this is close, 23¼ inches about, which is pretty long for a size small frame. Allows me to have a shorter stem on it. This is the stock stem, the Sunday BMX stem. Pretty sweet. Great geometry. Front end comes up nice and easy on it, like I've already said. And you know, the back end isn't as short as like a Karate Monkey. You know, they have the curved tube, but trust me, I don't know if it's the bottom bracket height or what makes this bike easier to pull up on the front end, maybe the taller bars, something like that. But it rides really nice and it's super agile, and you know, you can throw it around really good. I'm going to talk a little bit about the parts on this bike that I've upgraded. The bike came with these OEM SRAM NX cranks, and they were just like so not cool. They had the old school style European bottom bracket that has the little lock ring on it, and then I believe it was like ISIS spline drive type system. The sprocket was steel. It didn't have a hollow spindle. It had a solid spindle, just not what you see for most NX cranks. I don't even know how it was an NX crank at all. But I updated to the race face turbine crank, and I added the wolf tooth sprocket. So that's pretty sweet. And then I also added a dropper post. I have some videos about this. P&W, which I believe stands for Pacific Northwest. That makes sense. Probably a company out of Washington. But I've been very curious about those posts, so I'll be reviewing that throughout the summer and letting you know how it holds up and how I like it. The functionality is pretty smooth as a new post, but let's see how well it ages. I put a wider seat on it. The Volt is kind of a standard WTB saddle, but the original one was a little narrow, so I got a wider one. Plus, when you get an aftermarket Volt, you get the little protection on the side, so if you crash, you don't shred the seat and stuff. So the aftermarket Volts are definitely nicer than the ones that come stock on the bikes. Comes with these Surly bars. I forget the name of them, but they're super wide, kind of old school style cruiser bars. This bike wants to move on me and fall. Probably, like I would say back in the late 70s, early 80s, 26-inch cruisers were a thing, and they would have these huge bars on them. That's basically what these bars represent. I'll probably cut them down a little bit. I actually don't mind the wide bars, but they're just a little too wide for me, and they're definitely wider than even the bars on my full suspension bike. So I'll probably take like half an inch or maybe an inch. It's one of those things that I got to be really careful how much I cut off, because once you cut them, you can't go back. Brakes on this bike are okay. I mean, they seem to work pretty good. There's something I've never heard of. Let's see if we can get some light on there. Move this bike into the light, and they are Pro Max brakes, mechanical. The rotors look pretty good. They work, and they're disc brakes, but that's about it. I will probably upgrade those at some point. I really like the TRP spike brakes. The pistons close on both sides on those, and they're still mechanical. And good brakes. I have them on my fat bike. I don't think I'll go to hydraulics. I mean, kind of the point of single speed is simplicity. So going to hydraulic brakes would just be getting too high tech for this bike. Dropper post compatible frame. I kind of have a hokey wiring on there right now because I haven't decided how I want to mount that cable. But if you look over here, you can see that the frame does have the cutout for dropper post, so it's dropper compatible right out of the box, even though it doesn't come with a dropper. Single speed, the setup for that is pretty slick. It's actually a through axle that slides back and forth on the frame, and there's the chain tensioner. It's a really neat system, and as you can see, you could also run gears on here if you wanted. You could put a rack on it if you wanted. Don't know why you'd do that on a bike like this, but you never know. Sealed bearing hubs. This bike actually comes with a geared hub or geared free hub. This is not a single speed dedicated hub, which is interesting, but if you did want to throw gears on here, you wouldn't have to replace the hub. You just throw on a 10-speed cassette or something and your derailleur and hook up your cable and lever, and you're good to go. So that's it. Oh, I did go tubeless. Comes with tubes like most bikes. Wasn't taped. It was interesting because my Heller was pre-taped on the rims. So when I went tubeless, all I really had to do was take the tubes out, throw the goop in there, put the valve stem in, throw the tire on, pump it up. This bike, I had to do the taping and figure that out. That was kind of a pain in the butt, but first time I've taped the rim, but that worked out. The other thing about this bike is the fork. It's a rigid fork. It has the curb in it, so I've heard people comment because as a BMXer, that curb's a little funky. There are some really old BMX forks that did this, but for the most part, from a looks perspective, I would prefer a straight fork with a dropout, forward dropout on it. A little bit of surly history here, though, is this bike's essentially replacing what they used to make was a 1x1, which had a much shorter top tube, had more of a old school XC geometry to it. This is definitely a much more modern version of what a 1x1 would have been, but the 1x1 had a fork very much like this, so I think they're kind of keeping that surly tradition. If you look at most of their forks, this is how they are. So instead of having a dropout come out to the front, they just add the curve. So the trail and offset and all that is spot on. Rides fine. It's a looks thing. I think I've just about covered everything about this bike that I wanted to cover. I will be riding this bike a lot in 2020 and be doing some videos. I'll do some jumps. I'll just shred with it and have some fun. I have a couple other bikes I'll be riding and doing videos with throughout the summer. But this one is going to be one of my favorites, and I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of mileage out of this thing. All right. That's my Surly Lowside review. More to come on this bike as summer progresses. Thanks for watching.